It is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano, Jonas Shaffer, and we're joined by Giana Han. We have three members of the Baltimore Banners Ravens coverage team. No Kyle Goon on this episode. That's okay. I think we're good. We have plenty of loud voices on this show. We are going to talk on today's episode about the burning questions that remain for this Ravens team as they approach their preseason finale that Giana Han will be attending in Green Bay. And we'll be debating some of the topics that face this team and getting Giana's thoughts on her recent visit to Pittsburgh Steelers training camp. But first off, Giana, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a while, not since really the start of training camp, I think, that we've had you on the Banner Ravens podcast. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. And I guess I count as a loud voice now that Kyle Van Noy said I bullied someone in a press conference. So
really? Explain.
Well, I don't think this has ever happened to me, but I actually won in the who can get their question out louder and more forcefully than everyone else in the scrum. And I got some kudos from Kyle Van Noy he was like, wow, you bullied him. So
wow.
I guess I've never been accused of being loud before.
I do like it when sometimes you guys and Kyle have to fight with each other over the question. That's perhaps my most favorite bit of drama. Do you ever win those, Jonas, or do you just rely on your height to make you stand out?
Yeah, I usually hang back and just wait until the end of the presser. That's when I usually get the best chance to ask my weird questions. And Chad Steele, if you're watching this, the head of Ravens PR, knows to look at me at the end, because that's usually when I do my best work. Sometimes I don't get those questions in, which is usually when my plan backfires. But the first part of the pressers are for tweeting, and then the back half is for me trying to get a question in edgewise, and sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding, but always having a good time. I'm just there for the vibes.
Chad is the only one
has become either famous or infamous for those last minute questions.
Yes. Jonas is also the only one who can make eye contact with Chad because you guys are both on the same.
I'm taller than him.
Really?
Than him.
Wow. Yeah. Are you challenging him to any kind of athletic competition?
Back to back.
He might have played D1 basketball. He might have shared the court once with Kevin Garnett during his days playing ball in South Carolina, but I'm taller than him. And frankly, at this stage in our lives, that's all that matters.
That's wow. If you're still clinging on to that, then you've got your priorities straight. All right, guys, I got to give you 3 declarative statements, and I want you guys to convince me one way or the other as to whether this is a true or false statement. Are you guys ready?
Let's go.
Go for it.
All right. First and foremost, we have seen 2 preseason games for the Baltimore Ravens thus far. We've gotten a good look at the Ravens rookie class. We have seen a little bit from Nate Wiggins. We've seen more from Roger Rosengarten in that second game. We saw Adisa Isaac make his debut in the preseason. Devontae Walker is yet to make a catch. TJ Tampa is yet to appear in a preseason game. Rasheen Ali we saw in the first game, not the second. Devin Leary is Devin Leary. And Nick Samak and Sanusi Kane are battling it out for spots on this roster right now. Mike's statement for you guys: we should not be concerned about the Ravens' lack of production from their rookie class so far. Is that true or false?
You want to take it away, or you want me to just start talking?
Here's what I think. I think the baseline for like what makes a good draft class in general is when Daniel Jeremiah, former Ravens scout, obviously NFL Network draft guru, has, I think, voiced time and time again, which is that like you got a good draft class if you've got 3 starters from that class. And I think obviously we are looking at Roger Rosengarten trending to be potentially the week 1 starting right tackle. You've got Nate Wiggins, whose talent is obvious, might not be a week 1 starter, but I think with Brandon Stevens probably on his way out in Baltimore is headed toward, a starting job opposite Marlon Humphrey, assuming Marlon is back next year. And then you've got, a bunch of guys who could be that 3rd starter. Devontae Walker, not really all that much to write home about, frankly, if we want to kind of be negative. but I think you could pencil him in as the wide receiver 3 next year if Aguilar moves on. TJ Tampa was talked about as potential day one talent who fell to that early 4th round, who could obviously find his way into the rotation. Rasheen Ali, we don't know what Derrick Henry's future is. We don't know what Justice Hill's future is in Baltimore. But even though this has been a not exactly stellar training camp, he had the near fumble. He's had the stinger or the concussion or whatever is going on with him. It's not inconceivable that a year or two from now we could be talking about him potentially being a starter. So it's I think it's something that you don't feel great about, but I think you have at least 2 starters, and you're giving yourself the runway to find 3.
Yeah, I think it's very early to be judging a whole draft class, and especially when you have, I don't know, like an Indisa Isaac, D-line / edge / outside linebacker, is a position that it takes a little bit to develop, as we kind of saw with Justin Madubuike, right? So how can you say it's a failure if, these guys take some time? But I think in context of this window the Ravens don't like to admit they have, that's where it gets concerning to me, is you've got only so much time with Lamar in his youth. You only have so much time with Derrick Henry back there. Some of these defensive stars aren't going to be here all that long. So if you're trying to go for it right now and you're relying on Roger Rosengarten, who I think might be able to start, but how great is he compared to what they thought, versus like Morgan Moses that they had, which I think you might circle back to later. But that's where the concern comes from me, is not judging the draft class as a whole, saying I think it's way too soon. Like even at the end of the season, I think it will be too soon to say this draft class is a failure or not. But when it comes to, we got to win now, we only have so much time with XYZ guys, we need these guys to step up now. Like Adisa, he did really well and the very little bit of time we saw him, but he's behind. He hasn't played. He's been injured, and now he's going to be injured again. So he's going to be even further behind. So he might turn out to be a star, but when? Like, when will he be back from injury? When will he be in shape? When will he catch up? Will it be in time to help them to a Super Bowl? Devontae Walker, maybe he just needs some time, but they're kind of short on receiving options right now. So they need him now. Maybe they have another chance next year, but like, they're not looking at next year. They're looking at win now. Like if you talk to Lamar, are you guys building up this roster to win next year? No, he wants to win now. So that's where the concern for me comes in.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where because you have so much of your salary cap dedicated to a select number of veterans, when you have Lamar Jackson eating up as much as he is, and you have Marlon Humphrey eating up as much as he is, you and Justin Madubuike having earned a $100 million contract, you have to get production from your guys on rookie contracts. That's not just your rookies. That's guys who have yet to get their second contracts in the NFL, but rookies are included in that category. And the way that the Ravens roster is structured right now, they simply need production from those guys right now. And I think it is concerning because the two most important areas of this team where they need young guys to step up, you could make a case, is offensive line. And you could say wide receiver is another one. And Roger Rosengarten, they're relying a lot on as a second-round rookie, and they're relying a lot on with Devontae Walker. I think you feel better about where Roger Rosengarten is in his development than Devontae Walker, but there's also more on his shoulders than there is for Devontae Walker. So I'm not overly concerned at this point. It's just now is the time. Because the Ravens are a team that doesn't play their starters at all during the preseason, now is the time where we should be seeing these guys flash, and we just are not right now. But that leads us to our second declarative statement, which is about the offensive line. At this point, we seem to have our 5 starters, not set in stone, but we have a good idea of who's going to be starting along that offensive line. We think it's going to be Ronnie Stanley, Andrew Voorhees, Tyler Linderbaum, Daniel Failele, and Roger Rosengarten. And my statement for you guys, true or false, Lamar Jackson, 2-time MVP, is good enough to overcome the offensive line that the Ravens have constructed in front of him?
I was thinking about this earlier, Paul, and I kind of came up with a different answer, which is like, it really depends on how much how willing the Ravens are to expose Lamar and what kind of exposure they're comfortable with. Like, we've seen Lamar's volume in the read option game kind of come down since those highs of 2019. I think part of that was, more confidence in the running game of old under Greg Roman. Part of that was not wanting to, put Lamar in places where he could be hit by that edge defender, by that conflict defender. But I feel like if the Ravens want to have this run game work and this offensive line for the first 2 weeks of preseason, obviously no Tyler Linderbaum, obviously no Ronnie Stanley, has not gotten the kind of push that suggests that this is going to be an elite running game. How can you fix that? Well, putting those two starters in is definitely going to help, but so is going to be, running run plays that have the math in your favor, where Lamar is part of that run game. But that also means that you're, like I said, exposing him to more injury risk if he is going to be taking these runs up the middle or off to the side, where maybe in years past or seasons past, even last year under Todd Monken, that wasn't a huge emphasis. So are you willing to take more risks on first and second down with Lamar in the run game so that you are getting more 3rd and 4s, 3rd and 5s instead of 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s, where you have to have those deeper drops, those, longer waits for Lamar to have someone come open. And I think it really just comes down to this kind of tug and pull, this wait and see approach, where we don't know how good this rushing offense will be. And I think that's probably going to decide if, this offensive line is good or bad enough for this passing offense to have any chance of kind of recapturing the heights of last year, when it was, more than good enough in so many weeks to carry this passing offense.
Gianna, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that, you can't really talk about the Raven or ask about the Ravens offense in a press conference without hearing them mention Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. So I don't know if this is necessarily a question of Lamar Jackson. Don't get me wrong. He in of himself is star power enough to just talk about him, but they have Derrick Henry now. So the question is Lamar Jackson or are Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry enough to overcome the offensive line? And it's funny because I actually turned to Jonas during the last game and I was like, this run game's really bad. But then again, Derrick Henry's not here. But then again, this is probably like what the starting line is. So they might be enough. Do you want them to be enough? Do you want Derrick Henry to have to just rely on his own strength and his own explosiveness and risk himself versus having someone else clearing the way for him? Do you want Lamar running everywhere, as Jonas was saying? And do you even want him running that much? He has been focusing a lot on his passing. Yeah, he got lighter, so he will be lighter on his feet, but he was also lighter and might get smushed because he's lighter. So I think they can overcome a lot, but how much and for how long, it's not even like skill to me. It's more safety, more about whether they're going to get injured, whether they have the stamina to hold up to it. Because I do think they can erase a lot of things. And I do feel that for the most part, we've seen relatively decent pass protection, except for they're very like when they don't block, it's really bad. Like it's really, really bad. Josh Johnson's just getting pancaked. It's been the run blocking that's really concerning to me because they've gotten like a few yards here and there. So again, it's going to look different when Lamar and Derrick are in there, but I wouldn't be super encouraged by the line. I think that's one of the things that I'm most concerned about heading in is, are these guys ready? And are these guys the guys? Or are they just the guys that they have they thought they had, but they're not,
Yeah, I mean, I would add that like offensive line, just like a lot of positions, is kind of that weak link position, that weak link unit where you're defined more so by the worst person in your rotation than by the strongest. And, I think 2021 was probably the toughest year for this Ravens offensive line. That was when the injury problems really started for Ronnie. That was the Alejandro Villanueva season. I went back and looked at the 2021 PFF rankings. I think they finished 21st overall among all the NFL offensive lines. And they really only had, I think, 2 above average starters that year. It was Kevin Zeitler at right guard and I think Bradley Bozeman at center. And I think for this group for Ravens fans to feel good about this group, you probably need 3 good starters. I think we can comfortably say that Tyler Linderbaum, assuming this neck injury is going to be a thing of the past by the time week 1 rolls around, you feel really good about him being a far above average starter. You hope that if Ronnie Stanley's ankle and knee are comfortable enough that he can make it through this season and be a really good, if not all pro type player. And so then you're just, I think, looking for who's going to be that third guy to step up. Do you feel good about Andrew Voorhees by the end of the season developing into a potential road grader at left guard? Do you feel like Dana Faalele is going to be comfortable by the middle of the season and finally looking his part as a right guard? Is Roger Rosengarten going to be in for a kind of exponential growth over the course of the season as he gets his feet more and more wet with the strength and speed at the edge? All those guys, I think, are huge question marks because their youth or their inexperience or just how atypical they are for their position in the case of Faalele. So I think if you want 3 good starters along this offensive line, you're probably going to have to wait a little bit, and you might have to wait until next year if we're being honest.
Yeah, I guess that kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the rookies. If this is your year, I don't know if you have the answer to this, either you, but how long is the runway for them to develop into that third starter that you're talking about? Like, do they have the time to wait for half a season for one of them to step up? Because I don't know, every single one of them you see good, and then even Andrew Voorhees, he was the most solid one, I think, through camp, and then he just let that block go, or he let that sack up, and it was so bad. Everyone was just like, oof. And so can you afford that? And how long can you afford that for? And they don't seem super concerned about Tyler Linderbaum, but I don't know, Jonas, if he doesn't come back in decent time, that makes me a little nervous, at least. I feel like they need him so much in that center, not just for like his skill at snapping the ball, but just the communication, the leadership, everything.
Yeah, everything before the snap. I mean, you're talking about a Chiefs defense that week 1 is going to be playing with a just absurdly loud crowd behind their back. They're going to be, probably having spent all summer cooking up some stuff with Spags and the kind of exotic blitzes that they have. The pass rush should probably be even better than the version that the Ravens had a lot of trouble with because, George Karlaftis is, looking like a beast. Chris Jones will probably have some, fresh legs. The first round pick last year who hardly played at all is more involved in their rotation. So if the Ravens are not ready, boy, are they going to look at Arrowhead in a couple of weeks' time.
It's a shame that the schedule is not inversed because if you ended the season with the run of the Chiefs and the Cowboys and the Bills and the Bengals, you'd feel like there's a better chance that their offensive line would have come together as a group and that the young guys, and especially Roger Rosengarten, would be more seasoned at that point in the season. But to start the season with this difficult a schedule, given how much time together this unit still needs in order for you to feel good about it, that's the frustrating part. It also is funny because in a sad, morbid way, but the way that the Ravens have their roster constructed, it just feels like any one lever that they pull, the others, you lose tension on the others. Like last year, you're able to get OBJ as like a top flight wide receiver, and then you have little production from your running game. I know they still had a very overall productive running game, but last season, obviously in the playoffs, it came back to haunt them that they didn't have a true RB1 with J.K. Dobbins going down. Now this year they have the RB1, but they don't have the wide receiver talent and they don't have the offensive line talent. So it's just that's life in the NFL. Is you can't get all of your pieces to gel at once. You can't be able to invest in every single position group right now, and the Ravens are just going to hope to get by with the group that they have at offensive line. All right, my final question here, my final declarative statement, true or false. The Ravens should feel satisfied with having 38-year-old Josh Johnson as QB2. This is a guy who has been relied upon very rarely in the NFL. He's started just 9 career games. He's played in 39 in his NFL career. He's 1-8 in those 9 starts. He's played for the Alliance of American Football Who remembers that? I barely do. And the XFL at points during his career in football. Of course, he started one game for the Ravens in 2021. He was QB3 last year with Tyler Huntley being QB2. Huntley goes to Cleveland, might not even make the Browns at this point. It's just an interesting dynamic for the Ravens to be bringing back Josh Johnson and to be elevating him in his age 38 season to QB2. Should we feel good or should we not? Jonas, let's start with you.
I don't feel good because I just don't see the stylistic fit, and I don't see the I don't see the philosophical fit with everything that Todd Monken has told us about what he loves in Lamar Jackson, which is that ability to make the second play, to turn a bad play into a good play within that same play. You know, he is not especially mobile. We've seen him do some nice scrambles here and there in the preseason, but you know, he doesn't offer what Tyler Huntley did when he was running around Baltimore. He's had some kind of like boneheaded interceptions in training camp. You know, a couple pick sixes, stuff that you would expect. You know, a guy who's been around the block as many times as 38-year-old Josh Johnson has to avoid. You know, obviously the warm afterglow of that very nice performance against the Falcons, I think, is still, you know, giving him a little bit of shield, a little bit of cover. But I feel like we've gone from a situation where, you know, after that nice Tyler Huntley season a couple years ago, where, you know, you could have comfortably ranked him within like the top 5 or top 10 backup quarterbacks in the league, to I don't know if Josh Johnson would even be like the top 15 or the top 20. But I mean, I feel like most of the teams around the league, you know, kind of feel the same way about their backup quarterback that they do about their offensive line. Like, boy, we really don't like where we are. So maybe it is just like a woe is me situation that most fan bases in the NFL have to deal with. But I just feel like with how old he is, with his play style, with, you know, some of the things that wide receivers kind of get away with because of Lamar, you just don't have that margin for error with Josh Johnson.
Gianna, what do you think?
I think that if you go back to the last time I was on this podcast, we talked about this, and I'm going to argue the opposite. I was always saying that, you know, if Lamar gets hurt, the season's screwed anyway. So, you know, I don't think any QB2 could get them to the Super Bowl, but shout out to our columnist, Kyle. Go read his story about this. He and I had talked, and he was saying, okay, but what if they're in the playoff race and Lamar gets hurt for 2 or 3 games? So those are 2 or 3 important games. Can Josh Johnson at least go 1-1, 2-1? And thinking about it that way, like just being able to Band-Aid over the loss of Lamar for just a little bit of time, I don't know if I'm confident in that. Again, as Jonas talked about the glow from the Atlanta Falcons game, well, I feel like the Atlanta Falcons defense and the Eagles defense are different conversations, and either way, they were both backups. So can he do that against, I don't know, a starting – sorry, Steelers are on the mind. But starting Steelers defense, and you have TJ Watt and Patrick Queen coming at him. Can he, you know, survive that? You know, they're at the end of the season. They're going to be very important games. They're always important games, but they're going to be extra important since they're at the end of the season when, you know, they might not have this thing locked up since they're starting the season with such hard teams. So I don't really have the confidence that he could do that. For all the reasons that Jonas was saying, and also just emphasizing the age again, how if you don't have a great O-line, and we go back to the last thing we were talking about, and they're just rushing through, can he make up for the lost O-line? And 2, can he survive the hits of a potentially holy line? Derrick Henry can only do so much. For me, like I was saying, it's Derrick Henry and Lamar. Can the 2 of them make up for the lack of this or that? And I don't think Josh Johnson can make up for the lack of anything. I feel like, no offense to him, he's a nice guy, but I feel like he's a lack that has to be made up for, if that makes sense. But wouldn't it be funny if Tyler Huntley didn't make the team? They picked him up after all of that drama.
Well, I did see a report from The Athletic that the Browns are looking now to trade Dorian Thompson-Robinson because they feel like they want to make room for Tyler Huntley. and they have to get rid of their QB2.
One of the most entertaining games I've ever seen. DTR, me and Preston were chuckling to ourselves.
In Cleveland, what was that? 28-3. I think the Ravens came away with that win in the first of their two matchups last year. The way that the Ravens have built their QB room and their backup QBs this year just feels kind of to me like the opposite of what most teams do. I feel like usually teams let their older veteran backups walk in free agency and they draft and develop their young guys. And it feels like the Ravens have done the opposite. I know they drafted Devin Leary, but they only spent a 6th round pick on him. And they let the younger guy, Tyler Huntley, walk out the door and instead brought back the cheaper, older guy in Josh Johnson. So if Josh Johnson wasn't good enough to be QB2 ahead of Tyler Huntley last year, why should we feel better about him being QB2 when he's just a year older? It's not like, he was just still developing last year and he needed more time in this offense. He is who he is. He's only going to get worse at this point. He's only going to decline athletically when you're in your upper 30s. So it just feels like a weird way for them to build this. It also comes down to, I think, what you want from your QB2. And it's clear that the Ravens are prioritizing somebody that they don't want to have to worry about. They don't want to have to think about. They want to be a coach on the field if Lamar goes down. There are benefits to that, but there are also negatives. And the negatives are you're not developing somebody for the long term. We're going to have this conversation again in a year's time when the Ravens are again going to be looking for another QB2. So they're not going to have a development guy in-house to hold on to on a rookie contract, assuming that they cut Devin Leary. And the downside is you're not going to see him grow over time. You don't have a very high ceiling for that position. You just have a high floor. And that's clearly what the Ravens are prioritizing and keeping Josh Johnson at QB2. But, if Lamar goes down at any point during the season, we're going to see that strategy tested.
They're playing with fire.
Yeah. Josh Johnson behind a bad O-line is a sitting duck, to Giana's point.
Yeah. Well, we will find out. Hopefully we don't. Hopefully Lamar Jackson stays healthy the entire season. We don't have to see Josh Johnson in any games except for some blowouts at the end. Giana, let's transition to the city that you were just occupying, not your current state, although we see you are in a hotel room in Green Bay currently. Is that where you're at?
Yes, sir.
Let's talk
Green
about
Bay.
Let's go back one flight.
I didn't know there was a downtown Green Bay.
2 flights. I had a layover in Minneapolis. So
all right, let's not talk about Minneapolis. Let's talk about Pittsburgh. Because you were able to see a tiny, tiny portion of Pittsburgh Steelers camp. You weren't able to get the full view because you were visiting media. And turns out Mike Tomlin's pretty harsh on allowing visiting media to witness practice. But you did get to see Patrick Queen, our old friend, in a Steelers uniform. What are the vibes like in Pittsburgh, and how's PQ doing?
Well, like I said, or like you set up, I can only talk about the locker room because I walked into the actual practice field with all the other reporters, and after about, I think I sent you like a 12-second thing, they told me, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but you can't watch. And I thought they were joking because I cover the Ravens and it's Steelers, but they were quite serious. So apparently you cannot see Steelers practice if you are not a Steelers media member. Every team has their own things. The Ravens have their own things, so that's theirs. But within the locker room, Patrick is the same old Patrick. It seems like he has made some connections there. A lot of the guys were, messing with him. They were joking that we're doing a 30 for 30 on him because we chatted for quite some time. He did joke a little bit about how some of the things he said, people have taken and run with it. I guess, based on the food article I did, the reason he said Pittsburgh's food is better is because he doesn't eat seafood outside of Louisiana. And Baltimore is completely based on seafood, at least reputation-wise. And he's not the only one. Odell and Ardarius Washington feel exactly the same way. So you can hate on him for it, but he's not the only one. But yeah, it sounds like some of the linebackers there have really taken him under their wing. He has really developed a relationship with Mike Tomlin. It is a little bit weird for him still. and he talks to the Ravens every day. So he is very in tune with everything, and you will find out more from both my article and one of Jonas's articles. We'll have a little tidbit from that. But it's going to be interesting to see him there. I think that they have a very well-known defense, obviously, and I asked him for some of the similarities and differences, and he admitted like they're very similar defenses. They're both known for their hard-hitting play, and I think fans from both sides will hate that there's any similarities at all because they hate each other so much. But if you think about playing the Steelers as a Ravens fan, you think about a tough defense, like the defense pretty much beat them in that first game. And then if you think as a Steelers fan about the Ravens defense, you're going to complain about how aggressive they are. So it's very, very similar that way. So it was an easy transition for him. But yeah, stay tuned. Got to see him in person in black and gold. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Gianna, Gianna, you put in our Slack, and I completely misread this initially. At least I think I misread it. You said that there's a pic of Marlon Humphrey being burned by the Steelers locker room, and I thought you meant that there were like arsonists on the Steelers roster.
They're sending pictures of Marlon Humphrey. No. I think that's happening in Brazil.
It was a picture of Marlon Humphrey being burned.
Yes. I think if anyone's burning pictures of Marlon Humphrey, it's Brazilians, not the Steelers people. But I thought it was funny. I think in the Ravens media room, there's a picture of Marlon, very blown up.
Yep.
But you walk out of the Steelers locker room, and there's always something. So it's very funny to see what pictures they put up around locker rooms. I'm a nerd about this because I wrote my college thesis on art and sports and visuals in sports. But for example, when you walk out of the Flyers locker room, it was a picture of them scoring on a penguin because they also are rivals with Pittsburgh in hockey. And that penguin ended up being on the Flyers. So he had to walk out of the room every day and see himself get scored on. So in this case, you walk out of the room and you see someone just running straight past Marlon and Humphrey, and he's trying to catch him. You knew that he was never catching him. So that was the first thing I saw when I walked out.
That's I mean, I have the same thing. I have a picture of Jonas, sneezing on my wall so that I have motivation to go out there and just dominate him every day.
I thought you were gonna have pictures of TJ's kids on the obstacle course, you know.
That too. That's my motivation. It's going to be an interesting battle between the Ravens and the Steelers and the Bengals in this division, and the Browns, of course, because you have three great defenses. Bengals probably not so much. You have some good offenses in the Bengals and the Ravens, and you've got some mediocre ones in the Steelers and the Browns as well. And I think the quarterback question is still going to dominate in Pittsburgh, and I still don't fully understand what they're doing with Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. I just don't see the upside there. But that's obviously the dominant storyline in Pittsburgh. But I'm glad to I'll be excited to read what you have from the Pittsburgh Steelers camp on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months.
I can give you a quick Russell Wilson story.
Yeah.
I got very lost because their facility is quite confusing, and I'm wandering around, and I was not where I was supposed to be. And Russell Wilson comes around the store and just goes, "Hey," and I was like, "Hey," and I I have no clue where to go, and I was like, "Should I stop Russell Wilson and be like, so where does the media go?" Luckily, someone stepped in and found me at that point and was like, "Oh, are you Giana from Baltimore?" But yeah, I was this close to asking him for directions.
He's new there, so he probably didn't even know where to go.
Right, yeah. And it was their first day practicing there and not at St. Vincent, so.
Gotcha. Well, that'll be an exciting article to read.
Did you tell him you were a fan of Sierra?
I should have. I could have gotten in really quickly.
Yeah, that's the end. Jonas, are you a fan of Sierra?
I can tell my.
She had that one. She had that one good song, right? I'm looking at it right now. She did 1-2 step. I think she did Goodies. Yeah.
Can you do the
goodies.
Dance, please?
My goodies. Yeah. My goodies. Not my goodies. I think she had a bunch of guest spots too. Yeah. Who doesn't like Sierra?
I hate to say this, but I think I'm a little young to know much
Yeah.
of her music. Sorry.
My goodies sounded familiar when you started performing at Jonas. That's really what triggered the memories of it. It sounded just like ours.
Did you? What about 1-2 step?
I remember that.
Well, that one's a classic.
When you 1-2 step.
Yeah.
Can you do
that?
that? Get up and do the footwork for us.
I don't know it. And also, I'm wearing shorts.
That's even better.
Exactly.
Giana, thanks so much for joining us here in this silliness. At Giana_Jade is her Twitter handle. Jonas is at Jonas_Shaffer. I'm at Paul Mancano. We'll have complete coverage for you as the Ravens prepare for their preseason finale in Green Bay. Giana will have coverage on the BaltimoreBanner.com where you can read all of her great stuff and Jonas's great stuff and Kyle's great stuff. $1 for 6 months. And Jonas and I will have a post-game podcast as well. For Giana Han and Jonas Shaffer,